What's up everyone, my name is David Arroyo, and in this video we're going to be talking about how to use Blender. Okay, so we're going to cover the fundamentals, the really basics. So this time it is a tutorial video. In the previous videos I showed how to use Blender, but just as an inspiration point, okay, just as showing you like what you could do with Blender in combining it with concept art. So now we're going to dive deeper into Blender and actually see, okay, how did I make these environments, how did I make these rooms? We're really going to cover the basics. So we're going to start with the user interface and navigation, and then afterwards we're going to move on to editing and all that stuff. Obviously it's not all going to be one video. I've separated this into several videos, and this is the very first one of that series. So what do you say that we dive right in and let's enjoy. Okay, so let's start by looking at where you can get Blender. So Blender you can get at blender.org. Okay, right here you just go to download Blender and you will get immediately the right operating system for you because it detects it. All you have to do is just press the green button, download. It goes pretty fast. Here you can see it is a download of about, I don't know, 150 megs, depending on how fast your speed is. On PC it's the same. PC and Mac more or less the same. As you can see, I'm running a Mac. Then all you have to do is just double click and it will do the open sequence. And for Mac it's pretty simple. All you have to do is drag and drop it into there and that installs it. And I've already done that, so I'm not going to do that. Once you've done that, let me get rid of these two because I've already done all of this. There we go. Once you've installed Blender, okay, for the PC, you get a pop-up menu just like any other installer, and it goes pretty fast, you can see. Right, so once we got that done, we can open Blender. So in my case, it's right here. You'll get your splash screen, which is this right here. All you have to do is just click anywhere and it goes away. Then I'm gonna maximize the screen, and this is the standard starting screen for Blender. So in this first video of this tutorial series, I'm gonna focus on interface, so the interface of Blender, and some basic navigation. Good. So the first thing that you notice is the screen here, so the main 3D viewport basically. Okay, so this is your main area where you're gonna be doing your work. On this side you've got your outliner, which basically as soon as I click on something else, I'm left clicking. Oh, let me quickly turn something on for you guys. Screencast keys, there we go. What is that? It's just so that when I click on something in the left corner, you will see what I clicked. Quite useful if I do shortcut keys and all that kind of stuff. Right, so you've got all this stuff here. When I click on an item here, for example, the camera, okay, you will see that here on the outliner the camera is highlighted. Same for the same way if I click the cube will be highlighted here, but you can also just select items here and then you'll highlight the light. So this is a light, this is a camera, this thing is a camera right here. This is a light source, and this is a cube. Now, it might all seem very like overwhelming at first, and you're like, okay, what the hell is all this? Don't worry about it. We're going to take it step by step. Okay, so there are different windows, if you will, or sections of the window. So the 3D viewport is what you're looking at right here. Your outliner is what you're looking at here. These are additional menus for all kinds of operations or features, or this one you should really just leave it for now. These are when we're a little bit further, then we'll start focusing on all these, but for now just completely ignore it. This is important for you at this stage. Obviously your 3D viewport, and this is just a timeline which is useful for animation. So as soon as I press spacebar, you see this blue little thing moving from left to right. That's basically your frames, and you can just put it back and stuff. Now, The cool thing about Blender is that it is highly customizable. So just like I have a viewport right here, I could say, okay, well, I want another viewport. Like, you know, in Maya, you've got these 4 viewports. For those of you that are, you know, trying Blender and you have some Maya knowledge, you have your 4 viewports, and when you press spacebar, it goes in between the viewports. So depending on which viewport you're hovering over, when you press spacebar, it jumps in between. Really cool. Now here, you don't have that straight away, so you kind of have to add these viewports yourself. Now, how do you do that? You can go to the top corner. Okay, so you have to wait until it becomes a plus. And there's an important thing about this, because this is a little bit tricky at first, and it requires a little bit of patience, okay, and a little bit of practice. So you've got a little plus, okay? So you can see that this is clearly, as a matter of fact, if I hover over this, you can see that this is, let's say, the divider line. And when you see a plus and you hold down your left mouse button and you drag, so I'm dragging now, see, you're creating another viewport, okay? Now, it doesn't have to be a viewport. Whatever you put here is up to you, because when you click on this button anywhere, you can do that on any space here. You know, you can change at any moment whatever you want to see. You can just click on here and say, okay, I want this to be, I don't know, a graph editor, which is very useful for when you're animating. Or I want this to be a UV editor, and then you zoom in and, you know, you're modifying your file here and you can view it here. It can be anything you want. Compositor, timeline, text editor, outliner. Let's say you want another outliner for whatever reason. All this is perfectly possible. Now, that's how you do that. Now, let's say you wanted to get rid of this and you accidentally, or like, let's say I accidentally made another one. I'm like, oh, that's not really what I wanted to do. Okay, how do I get rid of this? Well, there's a few ways of doing it, but the way I know is when you go with your plus over on this side. So you have to make sure that it's on the other side that you want to be. So if you want to get rid of this window, you have to put your cursor on this side of this divider and your plus here. Hold it and drag it towards the right in this case. You'll start seeing an arrow on the screen, which means it's kind of like pretend that this screen is going to eat that one up or something like that, right? See, it's gone. Same here, if I want to remove it, so I put the plus arrow on this side of the divider, put it here, hold, and I drag it in that direction to say, okay, gone. Now, I'll show you again to add something else, because this is quite important. You can also do it obviously at the bottom. Say I go to the bottom and I wanted to add another one here, which is quite useful, because sometimes you might be wanting, you know, you're modeling here and you want to view different viewports here, like from different sides. So for example, here is a front view, and this would be side from the right or something, right? Don't worry about the keys. I'll explain all these things in a second. But for example, if I'm editing here, and again, don't worry too much about what I'm doing now. I'll explain all these things later, how to do them. But you can see how, for example, when I modify things or when I extrude things, you know, you can basically see all these modifications anywhere, which is quite useful because sometimes you might want to have this. Now, the reason why I showed you this is because it might happen that you've done this and then you want to collapse. You want to get rid of both of these and say, okay, I only want this view. Now, if you try it, it's not going to work. Okay, you're going to see this kind of icon that says no. The reason for that is because you're going to have to collapse these two first. So you're going to have to get rid of, for example, this one. This is going to eat that one. So you go plus, drag it down, you see the arrow, gone. And now you can get rid of that one. Okay, that's important to know that you can do that, and you can do that with all of them. Also here, you can create another window here. It doesn't only work here; it works anywhere, and you can make a mess really quickly. So, if you want to get rid of that again, you go on the plus sign here, and you just get rid of it like that. Okay, so that's the important part to know. Of course, Blender already has a few predefined setups for you. So this is, for example, the standard one, which is layout, which you can see here. Then you've got a modeling setup, which focuses on the edit mode. We will discuss that at a later point in time. You've got sculpting, which, all of these items that you model, you can sculpt afterwards. UV editing, you can do that. Texture painting, there's one specifically for texture painting. There's one for shading, where you can see the different type of setups and lights and all that stuff. Also, this we're going to see at a later point in time. And this is where you can set up your nodes and your colors. Really cool stuff. You can do a lot of really fun stuff. There's a setup for animation, where, for example, here's your camera. So that's the camera right there, and you can look at it. There's one for rendering, compositing, and scripting. This is interesting for people that are, for example, writing their own add-ons or really cool little features like that. And compositing is basically what you would do in After Effects, visual effects, film type of stuff. Really cool stuff as well. Right, so as you've noticed, you can do a lot of things. And some of you might already know about the grease pencil. That is not here, that's done differently, but we'll cover that as well, because when you open a file, right, when you go to File and you make a new one, you can make a general file like what we have here. So actually, let me just do that right now. So if I just click General, discard changes, this is what I get, right? But you can also open a 2D animation file, for example, and that's completely different. This is where you're literally just setting up Blender for making 2D animations, and it can do a lot. Okay, it can really do a lot. This is where you work with your grease pencil and stuff like that. You can also open up one for sculpting, where you purely only have sculpting and shading. You can, VFX, video editing, you get the point. There are many different setups. But normally we're always going to open up a general file. Even when I sculpt, I open up a general file because I can do a lot of extra stuff here that I might want to do next to sculpting, and then adding these things together. Right, so with that said, that is more or less the very basics of the user interface, where everything is. There are a few key elements that I might want to say, which are quite important. So how do you, for example, move around the camera, right? That's like one of the very first things you might want to do. So all of that is done just with your mouse buttons and your mouse, obviously. So as soon as I click the middle mouse button, okay, so the one with the scroll wheel, I can move around. Okay, so left, right, up, down, that's how I move the camera. Okay, let me again activate the screencast for you guys. Turn off, should work now. There you go, you can see it there again. To remove this menu, that's a menu that pops in and out, I'm just pressing the letter N. Okay, there's another menu here, that's a tool menu. When you press the letter T, it comes in, pops out. So T for this one, which is the tool menu, and N for this one. And here you've got information about your item, the tool that you're using, the view, all of these things I'm going to cover later on. But first, one thing at a time. So navigating. Okay, so we're looking at how to move. So that's middle mouse button. That will allow you to rotate. If you want to move up, down, left, right, you hold in Shift and then your middle mouse button. So Shift plus middle mouse allows you to kind of pan the camera, okay? If you want to zoom in, just scroll wheel. That's all you got to do, use your scroll wheel. Where is it going to zoom in towards? It's always going to zoom in towards the item that is selected. So, or normally that's what happens, or actually no, I'm lying. It's going to zoom in towards whatever the last focus point was. So say you want to zoom in towards the camera, right? You can make the camera your focus point, and you do that by pressing the 0 on the numpad. Okay, so if I press 0, sorry, not 0, the dot on the numpad. When you press the dot, all of a sudden it focuses on the item. Now, what happens if you don't have a numpad? Okay, so, and for those of you that are wondering what the hell is he talking about, what is a numpad? Numpad, you've got keyboards which have the numerical side on the right, where you have your 1, 2, 3, 4 and all that stuff up to 9, that side. That's a numpad. So if you have that, then you just have to press the dot on that in order to focus on different items. But not all computers have that, and that's not a problem for Blender. So say you have a MacBook and MacBooks never come with numpads. So what do you do there? There is a kind of like a pie menu that you can bring up by pressing this accent that sits on top of a letter. Okay, so this backwards accent, most of the time this accent is found in like French words or Spanish words. I've never seen it in an American word or English word, I'd have to say. Most of the time just accents like French words and stuff like that. So it's an accent on top of a letter that goes towards the left. Right. And once you hold that in, like what you see here, okay, you can, for example, in this case, go to view selected. Okay, and then you either click on it or you just let go. You let go here and it will go to view selected. Do the same thing, press that menu, view selected, and all of a sudden it focuses around that. So press that menu, view selected, go around, and you can all of a sudden focus on there. So you do not need a numpad in order to run Blender. This is important, okay? A lot of people, they think that you absolutely need a numpad. It makes your life easier, yes, but it's not required because all of the functions on a numpad are here again. So for example, view through the camera, that's pressing 0. Okay, on the numpad. If I press 0 on the numpad, I just go in and out of that. So, but that problem you don't have here. Same here on the numpad. If I press number 1, I go to a front view. Number 3 goes to the right. Number 7 top, and so forth. So you got a few of these ones that you can access. Obviously, you can also access them here. By the way, if you click on any of these, it will bring you to the view that you might want. So, and then from there on, you can rotate again. Okay, so that is very important about the numpad. So if you don't have one, don't worry. You can work with this. Right. Then basic navigation. Okay, really basic navigation. We're going to talk about how to move things. Okay, so these are the basic tools that you have at your disposal. Now there's another, that's while you're in object mode, very important. If by accident you press the tab key at any moment in time, don't worry about it, just press tab again, okay? Tab key just moves between edit mode and object mode. We are not going to be discussing edit mode in this video, only object mode, which is just a mode that allows you to do the very basic movements and scaling and all that stuff, rotating for the object itself. Right, so if I want to move this, okay, there are, again, a million ways to do it. I love short keys, so I'm going to show you the short keys, but I'm also going to show you the most obvious way. So when you click on this item right here, move, it allows you to move the item up, down, left, right. What are these lines? The green line is the y-axis. Okay, the red line is the x-axis, and the blue line is the z or z, depending on how you pronounce it, axis. Okay, and then you've got the same as for here. You can move them freely as well on this axis. So when you press this red one, so you will move it only on the axis except for the red. So on the green and the blue, same here. If I press that green one, I just have to move it a little bit, it's easier to see. Same here, so it will only move here, and same for the blue one, which is a little bit harder to press, but here we go, and then it will only move there. Okay, right, so that's how you move. Now let's say you want to move just quickly, right? So I'm deselecting and I select, let's say I don't even have this tool on activated. I just select it and I quickly want to move. Now that's the letter G for grab. Okay, G for grab allows you to move freely, but moving freely is maybe not the coolest thing to do because you have very little control over where your item is going to end up. So often what people do is they press the letter G followed by the letter of the axis that they want to move it into. So say, for example, I want to move this on the x-axis, then I press G followed by X, and then I'm not holding in any other mouse, I'm not like holding any button, I'm just moving the mouse from left to right. Okay, when I'm ready that this is how I want to put it. Let's say, okay, I want it there. Then I press the mouse button and then it drops it off there. So again, press the letter G, and then in this case, we'll maybe do on the y-axis, and then up, down, up, down. I'm not holding any mouse button, and now I press the mouse button just to let go. Okay, and the same goes for G and Z-axis and so forth. So this is an easy way for you to quickly check, or move your item in a specific direction. Now, what happens when you want to move your item, say, on the floor? Okay, and it's positioned on the floor and you want to move it on the floor. Right, so say you want to bring this back to the world origin. This is the 3D cursor. Okay, then you can just simply right click, snap, and then you do selection to cursor. Right, and then it brings it just back to where it was. And say you want to bring it up for a bit. Now, if you press Control, by the way, then it will snap in particular units. So if I press the letter N, remember that, and I bring it up or down, you can see on the Z-axis the number changes. Okay. Now it's going all over the place now because I haven't snapped to the Z-axis, but so I press the letter G, then the Z or the Z, whatever you prefer pronouncing it, or however you prefer pronouncing it, and then you bring it up, down, and you see. So now it's literally on the floor. So easiest way of getting this, like as soon as you open a file. So I'll open a file for you really quickly, and you want to bring this cube literally to the same height as the floor. You press G, you press Z, and then Control, and just bring it one up. Okay, and then it's always perfectly on the floor. So that's the easiest and the fastest way to do it, or that I know at least. Right, but let's say that now you want to move this item on the floor. So you want it to, so yeah, sure, you could do this and then say, okay, now I want to move it that way, but there's a way of moving it freely on the floor without it going on the x-axis, the z-axis. And that's by literally pressing G and then Shift Z. Then I will be able to move everywhere I want except for the Z-axis, or the Z. I'm going to call it Z from now on. It's easier for me. Otherwise, I have to keep saying Z, Z, whatever. Z-axis, it works, right? So, and the same here. So if you want to move it everywhere but except for the X-axis, so Shift X, and then you can move it everywhere, and it will never move on the X-axis. Very important, okay? Undo, as usual, is Control Z or Command Z. Let me turn this on and off again so that you guys can follow along. Right, so I think these are just the important ones where you can just move. So again, if you just want to bring it back, you can always just bring it back to selection to cursor. Obviously, if your cursor is placed in any other location, like I'm doing right now, and you do that by just selecting this item and then clicking anywhere. Now you'll notice obviously that the cursor just flies freely. You will click on places, but if there's no geometry, it will just go anywhere in space. So if you just now do a snap and you go selection to cursor, it will snap to wherever that cursor is. This can be very useful in some cases, and I'll show you that at a much later point in time. If you want to bring the cursor back to the world origin, which is where the Y and the X axes cross, you can just do cursor to world origin and it will be back there. The 3D cursor is quite useful for many different reasons, but again, we'll look into that when we get into editing. Right now, just the basics. So we've seen all the transformations, right? How we do it, how we can move, and all that. Now rotate. Okay, so rotating, same thing. It's just a button underneath, and then you can move around. You can rotate in that direction, in this direction, in the blue direction, all of them. You can do that, or you can, again, there's a shortcut key. So if you got your selection, you can press the letter R for rotate. If you just rotate now, it will just do whatever it feels like rotating. It will rotate on the axis that you're facing, basically. But you press escape to undo that if you don't want that. So you press R, and then, for example, you want it to rotate around its own axis. You press the letter Z, and then it rotates around there. Same for rotating on the x-axis. Basically, the axes that you're rotating around, you kind of got to pretend that it's like, you know, like these, something that you're barbecuing, or, you know, that you're roasting and you're spinning it around. Well, kind of like that. Think about it that way. Good. So that's rotating. And then you can also scale. Same here. So scale. If you want to scale it sideways, on the y-axis, on the x-axis, or on the z-axis, there you go. Same way. Also very interesting if, for example, you want to scale it also in only two of the axes, for example. So you can just do S for scale. So you press the letter S, and then, for example, Shift Z, and you will only scale on these two axes. It will never get like taller. You'll get wider, and you know, you'll have more surface space, but it will not get taller. Useful again when you're having items that are on the floor and you don't want them to go below the floor when you're scaling, for example. That's a good reason why you would do that, for example. And again, to just bring it up, you just do this, and now it's literally on the floor, or on the surface, if you will. Right, so that's that. There are obviously a few things that I've forgotten. For example, is that when you move or when you rotate, for example, you press R and again R, then you can just freely rotate like around its own pivot point. You can do the same with scaling, so SS will scale all over, and move. I think that's pretty much the same thing, but it only makes sense when you do it on R, for example. Because when you do a move, for example, you can already do that without pressing the G twice, and the same with scaling. When you do it once, already does it. But useful to know, especially when you're moving cameras around and all that stuff, which we will do at a later point in time. So here, a camera, again, remember, you could move your camera, but I mean, well, you could look through your camera, but from the moment you try to move the camera, like you say, okay, well, I'm in camera view now and I can do that. Camera doesn't really change at all. The view of the camera stays identically the same, and especially if you go into 3D mode and you start rotating, then you get out of the camera view. So this, again, I will explain in another video, how to rotate cameras and all that stuff. That's for later. Right, you can also move thingies around just by going here. So on your location, okay, so for example, you want to move something down, you just hold the mouse button and start dragging left, right. Very useful if you need to do very, very specific movements, okay? Also here, there's really a lot that comes to play. You can also put in a measurement, so 5m, 5 meters to that way. Or if you do minus 5m, or just minus 5, it will just bring you to that. If you do dot 23, it will just move these units. And so there you go. Same for rotating. Obviously, you can rotate things around on the y-axis right here, z-axis, z-axis. So you have quite some precision, and you know, scaling and all that stuff. All of that can be done. Very useful, right? And Command Z brings everything back to the way you had it. Or you can always just snap and then selection to cursor, and we'll just bring it back to wherever your cursor is. It's quite useful. Right, so I think with that, we've covered the really, really basics of just navigation and the user interface. Of course, there's much more to learn and to do, but we're gonna look at all these things one thing at a time. Okay, so for now, just focus on these things, practice these things a little bit before you move on, otherwise it's too much information in one go. Right, I will see you guys in the next video where we're going to start looking at basic transformation like editing And we might even start looking at the different shading options here, which are quite interesting as well. Right. See you in the next one, guys.